All right, all good.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, we can start with that. So,
Sure.
my name is Ariane. I'm from Quebec, Canada, and I've been really interested by vegetarianism and veganism a while back. So I've been either vegetarian or vegan for about 5 years in total. I started when I was 18.
Uh-huh.
And I've been really motivated at first due to the ethical aspect of vegetarianism and veganism. I was not really into the nutritional aspects, but maybe I should have been interested by that because when you start a diet like this, there's a lot of involvement for your body and for nutrition in general. So it was maybe unfortunate that I didn't pay attention to these things since the beginning. Um, so obviously the ethical aspects for me that were really salient and really important were um, factory farming to me is really, and still today, still kind of bothers me.
Mm.
Um, but then when you start to be in that vegan movement, you tend to lose track of what's really important, and it's really like a cult. And I wouldn't not think that at the beginning, because
Yeah,
I thought to myself like that it was really a complete and comprehensive moral system to me. For me, it was only my only moral certainty of veganism, in the sense that I thought to myself, like, it's a complete system that allows you to do minimum harm, and that is just really logical in itself because you don't want to cause harm uselessly if you're able to live off without having meat.
of course.
So that was like my reasoning. But then when you have a reasoning like this, there's, I would say, extremists in the vegan movement that think that, or purists that really think that you have to be very perfect and you're never enough. And so, I was on the Reddit community of veganism and people, and then at some point I was asking to myself, well, I guess I could have hens that would lay eggs and I would eat these eggs and that would be totally fine for them because I would not be inflicting suffering. But these people were telling me, like, no, this is not an ethical thing to do because you can't instrumentalize or use animals to your advantage. But then I thought to myself, like, and then something in my head, I was just thinking, well, this is not logical. I mean, but then due to the fact that I want to be a good vegan, I said to myself, well, okay, if I have hens, that's not right, and there's no way we can have animals without being no, there's no way having animals is ethical, finally. So anyway, that's just to show an example of how sometimes that community was really like extreme on certain ends. And really, when you start to be in an ideology, you lose track of your own ideals and you start to not think for yourself, but think for the movement. And so that
Mm.
was a bit unfortunate, and that's what I've went through in regards to ideology. So, and in general, when you start to adhere to an ideology, it's too late when you realize that you're adhering to group thought. So anyway, so that's a small reflection, but I'd like to talk a lot about the health issues I've been having with veganism and
Yeah.
vegetarianism.
Mm.
And so yeah, because I was really a very conscious person. I would eat a lot of fruit, vegetables, but I would eat a lot of grain products. And I think that this is really not good when I look at it back retrospectively. The first health issue I started to have was, I think it was been like 1 year since I was vegetarian, and I started to have like really bad digestive issues. I couldn't digest the dairy products anymore, and very sensitive to a lot of foods. But then I thought to myself, oh, I just became lactose intolerant. I'm like 19 years old. Maybe at some point the body is not really suited anymore to digest dairy products. But the toll of having like digestive issues was really bad for me because I was just in university, very stressed about everything also. And so that brings me to my second health concern. I developed very bad anxiety, and I mean, some people and the vegans that could listen to this could say, oh, well, anyone can become anxious, right? And that's kind of true, but I'm sure that veganism kind of contributed to that in the sense that before I would just experience periods of stress in my life. But with vegetarianism, um, I was just anxious all the time, and it was really bad because I could not sleep at night. The anxiety was so terrible that I could not have breathe properly and could not sleep at night for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's like really, really bad, especially like when you're trying to be successful and trying to study well or things like that. I was just so anxious and there was nothing to relieve it. And at some point I decided to see a psychotherapist because I thought to myself, well, I can't continue living like this. This is so awful. And it took a year of therapy to actually get my anxiety in control up to the point that it would not affect my sleep. But I still had this anxiety popping up at random times for no reason. Just something, a doubt, a thought that would bother me. And then I would be anxious, like physically anxious for the rest of the day. So
Mm.
I'm just wondering, maybe it was not veganism, but or vegetarianism, but I think that, there's probably a very close link together.
I'm very sure that it was.
Yeah, because, now I've been eating meat for 6 months and like barely no anxiety anymore. I
Right.
do have periods of anxiety and stress, but it's like nothing to compare to what I was experiencing. And back in the day, I never thought it could be the food I was eating. No one told me that. My boyfriend was also vegetarian, so it was not a doubt in our mind that the food could contribute to that. But when you think about the poor conversion of omega-3 from plants to
Yeah.
omega-3 that is usable by the body, that could be one factor among many.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was like a really bad issue I had, and especially like for a lot of people become vegetarian when they're 18 or when they're starting university, and they have this ideal of doing good in the world, and which is very okay, but it's not the moment. It's also a moment with a lot of transitions, a lot of changes in your life, so you might not want to become vegan at that point because it's just going to make everything harder.
Right.
Um, so anyway, so that was like another health issue. Another health issue I had, I think, yeah, so once, probably 2 years into vegetarianism, I already started to feel weak and feel like joint pain, especially in the summer for some reason, because I had a very physical job and I felt kind of tired and I didn't know what was happening. So, and then I started taking like creatine supplements,
Uh-huh.
creatine.
Of course.
Yeah, and for some reason it helped me feel better, but creatine is found only in animal products. But for me, it was not, I didn't think, oh, I should just be eating meat instead. No, I actually took the supplements. So, and then, but that kind of hid the symptoms for a while. And yeah, so anyway, that was no other thing I had. And parallel of that, the food sensitivities became worse and worse, especially when I became vegan on, I would say, the third year and a half of that journey. So at some point, I just switched to veganism, and things just became worse in terms of food sensitivities. And another thing is that I'm a very skinny person and very health conscious, but I just became so hungry. Like I've never experienced hunger like this with veganism. I was so hungry. Probably my body was telling me like, you've been you're missing nutrients, you should eat more. But I would eat, 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 and never gain weight. And I would eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, of course. So I was not like going into like vegan junk food for sure. But if I had, I would probably have gained like a lot of weight. And and then now I can talk maybe about the worst thing that happened to me and all of that.
Yeah.
Uh, so I had been vegan for about 4 years when that happened, and I had a severe case of mononucleosis. Do you
Right.
know what it is? Or it's called glandular fever in Europe. Sometimes they call it like that. So
Yeah, I looked into it when you wrote about
yeah,
it.
so essentially, like it's just for people that are listening that don't know what it is. It's usually it's a childhood disease that is not really bad when you get it when you're a child. If you get it when you're a child, it's just like a cold or a flu, whatever, and it's uneventful. You recover from it. There's no problem. But typically, it's also called the kissing disease because supposedly it's transmitted to saliva, but I don't think that's the case necessarily because I have no clue where I got it from.
Mm.
So, and then if you get it, if you're a teenager or a young adult, then the illness can be a bit worse in the sense that you can have more acute symptoms that are more pronounced for a longer period of time. So in my case, I had like really bad fever for 10 days. And I mean, no one I guess it was a bit of bad luck to have this viral illness. It was not my fault, but the problem is the recovery from it, because normally people recover in like a month they're fine, or maybe 2 weeks they're fine. They just get over it, right? But in my case, it's been very, very difficult. And now, despite eating meat for 6 months, I still have symptoms of that. So, and also the problem is that since it's a viral illness, there's no actual cure for that. So, and the symptoms are on a long-term basis are chronic fatigue. You know, chronic fatigue syndrome, usually people start having that once they have a bad case of mononucleosis that doesn't resolve by itself. Um, yeah, so anyway, like after like that 10 days of fever and I had to get hospitalized again due to like complications. I could not breathe anymore because my tonsils were so swollen, but I guess that can happen. Um, but I couldn't recover. Like I was so fatigued all the time. Just walking, I was fatigued. I couldn't. I remember I was reading like a few paragraphs and then totally forgot what I was reading about. I think, and my muscles were just weak, and I was feeling very, very awful. And to try to cure that illness, I thought to myself, why not go raw vegan? So
Uh,
so like the mistake that every vegan does. So anyway, so I started to be raw vegan but I was not like fully raw vegan, but because I found it very challenging, especially due to the hunger I mentioned previously.
yeah.
Um, and by the time I started to be raw vegan, I had been sick for 6 months, and doctors were telling me, "Oh, it's gonna resolve by itself." So on the part of the medical system, I did not get a lot of support and help, and no one ever told me you should be, changing your diet and whatnot, because obviously vegetarianism is promoted by public health and also or world organizations of health. So
Mm.
they're not going to tell you to change your diet because you're just obeying to what they're telling you, and you're following very closely the dietary guidelines. So nothing wrong with that, right? Um, so that being said, raw veganism just made everything worse. On some point, I think I felt better, but that was probably like, there's bouts of recovery in that illness, and there's bouts where I feel a bit worse. Um, I think maybe it was because of the ketosis. I don't know.
Mm.
But then once that was done, for I think a month later, I just felt so awful. And I looked at myself. I lost so much weight on that diet. I looked very emaciated. My muscles, like my arms were so skinny. My clothes were really, really too big for me. So, and I'm not a very fat person already, so losing weight was really shoved a lot. And I've been told by people, oh, you lost so much weight. But then I was telling them, well, that's just because I'm eating healthy now, you know? So the delusions that we have when we're
Wow.
so
Yeah.
convinced of the fact of what we're doing is right.
Mm.
And that's why I was talking about the cult ideology at the beginning. You're not able to see what's happening to you, and you're not able to see the harm you're inflicting to yourself. But then I truly realized at that point that, yeah, maybe there's actually something wrong with what I'm eating. So I started to reintroduce, I was a vegetarian ketogenic diet for a while. That didn't help much. But then when I reintroduced meat, things just got better. Um, I'm not saying that it was a miracle or a success story. Like I'd like to share a success story of me being perfectly healthy with meat. But the reality is that sometimes when you inflict harm to yourself, or I've been lacking nutrients for such a while. 5 years is long time, so my body has to rebuild itself. And I was vitamin D deficient. I was almost B12 deficient despite taking supplements. Um, Now my blood work really improved, but I still have like work to do in that regard. And there's deficiencies that are not necessarily tested for. I mean, there's mineral imbalances I probably had as well, because I think it's copper. There's a lot of copper in grain products or something, and zinc. I don't know, something like that. There's zinc in the meat, so I think that there's probably an imbalance that's possible there,
Yes,
and
because
also.
there's hardly any zinc in plants.
Yeah, so
That's
that's
the
another
imbalance.
aspect. And a lot of people who are diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome lack zinc. So I'm thinking that this could also be like another imbalance I had. And
Mm.
that's just of the knowledge we have. But I mean, biology is so complex, and you don't want to inflict harm to yourself like that.
What
So
supplements did you take? What B12?
Oh, I just took, I don't know exactly. Like when I was vegan, I took like just these white little pills
Mm,
because I know sometimes there's like liquid forms or, but I did not have the injections like a lot of people did.
okay.
Yeah, but it certainly wasn't enough. And I didn't take them systematically either. But I mean, that's just like if I have to take supplements for something, it means that the diet is clearly not adequate. So anyway, so maybe when I started eating meat, I'd like to share that story because it was a bit surprising. I did everything I could not to eat meat again, but then my boyfriend, which was also like vegan and trying to, he was actually in not too bad shape, but he had also issues, health issues. So we were like doing these transitions together, which was kind of helpful to me. And obviously, ethically speaking, I felt really bad about the fact that I would eat meat. But when I look at it, I was suffering so much. I mean, there's nothing bad with like having meat if you feel like you're about to die. Like that's really how I felt, right? With the
Right.
fatigue, it's terrible. It's like I don't wish that to anyone. It's really really terrible. So and I was really reluctant to try meat, and then my boyfriend, he was pushing me in that direction, and we had, I don't know if you knew that YouTuber that is called, I think his videos are not there anymore. His name is Homegrown Big. That was his channel.
No, I don't know.
Anyway, but he removed his channel a while back because I think he got too many insults from vegans or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So, and then we came across his channel and he was talking, sharing his experience with veganism and so on, and saying that indeed he had developed health problems despite eating very healthy, and that he decided to reintroduce meat into his diet and really help him get better. He had like random nosebleeds and weird things happening to him. So, and then it kind of inspired us to move forward and try meat. And indeed, meat was very satisfying. I was talking a lot about hunger, but this really seemed to alleviate my hunger. And because hunger, I think sometimes some vegan can also have like mental issues. And I don't want to sound mean, but if you're really hungry all the time, you kind of get grumpy a bit. So that's also a possibility there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I remember the first time I ate chicken. I consider myself a very rational person, okay? Like a very calm, posed person. But then my boyfriend cooked me some chicken, and when I ate it, I never had a feeling like that, but I felt there was so much passion in eating. I felt like I had been missing that for 5 years without really realizing it. And I was really euphoric,
Euphoric,
like
yeah.
really, yeah, very happy. Um, it was just like I cannot describe that. I was just so happy to eat chicken, and it was so relieving to me, and I felt that it was very good. I clearly had good biofeedback, so that's why I continued on to eating meat on a zero carb diet first, but after now I'm moving on to something a bit more like, I don't want to use the word balance, but a more easy to respect diet. So and the meat helped me in concentration, memory, because I had really bad memory problems. Help strengthen my body. So I think it's, if people are hesitating sometimes to move away from veganism and eating meat again, I really think it's worth it because it's really your health that's in danger at some point. So, but I still have this illness, so I'm trying to figure out, there's no treatment. I have to be patient. That's the reality.
Do you eat raw meat or cooked meat only?
Um, to be honest, because I don't have a lot of money, so if I had like a trusted
Right.
provider, I would eat raw meat, or
Mm-hmm.
at least I would try it. But now I go to Walmart to buy my meat, so I'm not like I don't trust it enough to eat it raw. But I do, if I make steaks, I make like very rare steaks, and I
Okay.
love it.
Right.
So, but I would definitely try it. And I mean, if I go to the restaurant, I have the chance to try like raw meat. I don't know if they prepare that. Tartar.
Yep.
That's very delicious. I love it. And same thing if I go to like a sushi restaurant or something, I'll just have a lot of the sashimi of raw fish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very delicious. So, and I eat a bit of fruit, uh, just as treats, I would say, as dessert. And I eat a bit of vegetables, but I try to avoid these like uh, vegetables that have a lot of insoluble fiber because that was just causing me too much problems.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So your
so
boyfriend stopped eating the diet with you together? Were you both?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like what happened. Yeah, he was just because he's very very curious about nutrition and he's read a lot and he was um especially when I was sick, he was doing a lot of research for me because I just didn't have the mental energy to do that.
Mm.
Um, and I think that he's always been aiming for the best health or the best way to eat. And of course, when we were vegan, we kept on reading about like Dr. Greger's things and
Yeah.
a lot about. We were listening to vegan YouTubers because, and we're reading studies that would confirm our beliefs and the fact that veganism was actually a healthy way to eat. And so for him, it was just a good transition because he had been vegetarian in the first place for health reasons, whereas my reasons were ethical. So for him, it was not really a big deal of moving away
Uh-huh.
from veganism. So, and for him, he also experienced really big improvements. And perhaps I can share a very small story. Um,
Sure.
he has a vegan friend, and they play badminton, I think once a week.
Yeah.
And then once my boyfriend started eating meat again, he became systematically better than his friend, and he always won. He's always winning against him. So I don't know. This doesn't tell a lot, but I'm thinking it might help him. And my boyfriend, he's been like training physically and all these things, and he was when he was vegan, he was kind of plateauing. He was not able to lift bigger weights, but now eating meat really helped him overcome these limitations.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. I mean, even for someone who, let's say, did not have a big major health problems with veganism, just eating meat again really helped him. So that's very interesting.
Did you have any other friends who were vegan besides your boyfriend?
Um, Actually, not a vegan, but I've known a couple of vegetarians,
Okay.
and but I kind of did not keep in contact with them, so I don't know. But I know one in particular. I think she was struggling a bit with health issues, but she's been a vegetarian since birth.
Okay.
Actually, I've known two people that were vegetarian since birth, and both had like really bad health issues. So I don't know if that's just a correlation or a causation, but it seems to be a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and a lot of they experienced digestive issues. One had PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, something like that. It's been there's a lot of issues that people can have with veganism. And also, like another thought we had, my boyfriend and I, is that in the time we started to eat meat again, we happened to rescue kittens. And it was a very interesting story because now I feel that it's so fun because they get to eat the same things as us. Let's say we're making food. Well, the kittens will have the same food, and we get to share this moment together, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking if I had rescued the kittens beforehand, I would have tried to give them soy or like very bad
Yeah.
food. And I don't know if you saw on Netflix, there's a documentary called Pet Food, and they talk about the problems with the pet food industry. And it's really crazy because I just can't believe that documentary because they talk about the fact what they include in dry food for pets. They just include soy, rice, all these things that cats should not be eating in the first place.
Yeah.
And when I'm trying to shop for my cats, I cannot find like food that is really suitable for them, except for ultimately like one of our kittens, she loves raw liver. She just loves it. She just smells it, and so that's what we feed her most of the time. But we don't want to feed it too much to her either, since it's liver. But we try to give them. Let's say we cook a turkey, a big turkey. We give them some turkey and so on. But for the pet foods, it's really, really sad because they put so many things on that. So I'm telling to myself, like, we have our public health agency, we have, our medical associations that promote a low-fat, high-carb diet. But we're also inflicting this harm on animals, like on our pets, on our companions. So, when I was vegan, I could not see these inconsistencies, but you have when you're able to get away from this mindset of having a complete moral system that is comprehensive, that explains everything, you're able to see all these inconsistencies in everyday life about things that just don't make sense. People that feed, and then the cats, they become diabetic. It's ridiculous. They all get all sorts of diseases. And it's ironical because in that documentary, they were talking about the fact that, oh, cats shouldn't be eating soy, cats shouldn't be eating rice, but there were no parallels that were made with humans. Like, I mean, and you realize, like, why should I be eating soy? There's phytoestrogens, or if we think about our ancestors, or just if I think about my closer ancestors, the French Canadians, they're not like it's not part of our culture to cook soy and prepare it. We
Mm.
people would just eat meat, a lot of meat here. There's different dishes with meat, so yeah, it's really crazy. We're not able to make this parallel. Like the veterinarians are saying, oh, we should not feed this or this to cats, but then for humans it's fine. So
I noticed that myself. Yeah.
so yeah, that's the story I want to share. So I don't know if you had other questions for me. I'm trying to
What do
think
you
maybe
think
of
is
other.
the future of veganism?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I'm very hopeful in the future actually because I'm very interested in science policy, and so I look at it from that perspective. And I think that we've been fortunate enough to see a shift in science paradigms from one that it was low fat high carb to one that is rather high fat low carb. So I'm thinking, and there's a lot of studies that tend to go in that direction. For example, there's been the Pure study published in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, I think last fall, that explained that fat was not, or saturated fat intake was not associated with high cause mortality. So that was already very interesting. And of course, there's a lot of studies that tend to demonstrate the benefits of ketogenic diets on health, and that tend to disprove the original hypotheses that of the diet hypothesis. It tends to be disproved in many ways.
Mm.
So I'm hopeful for the future in the sense that I think that there's new and interesting scientific knowledge that is being produced and that is being increasingly recognized by the scientific community and also just um, the community in general of people. But the problem is that public health agency requires so much evidence to change their policies. And I think that's a bit of a problem because initially, Ansel Keys' diet hard theory, it didn't have a lot of evidence to support it, or it was not like a very comprehensive theory. But since there was already no policy on food at the time, and since there were like commercial interests involved, this policy was rapidly adopted, and this policy of having to limit animal fat products or whatever. And but now we hold new scientific evidence to standards that are so high that it's just impossible to change policies. So I'm just hoping that anyway, again, I'm kind of digressing, but I just hope that over the time, new scientific knowledge will tend to accumulate and help public policies or public health policies shift in that direction. So that's a very hopeful and optimistic way of saying that. But on the other hand, culturally speaking, the few last generations have been so accustomed to the idea that meat is very, very terrible both for health and environment that I don't see any going back because if you think about the World Health Organization promoting veganism or vegetarianism, yeah, I think, or yeah, was it the World Health Organization? They had a statement about the fact that vegetarianism was like the diet for the future or something like that.
Mm.
Um, I do find that very problematic, especially because, some people that just trust these world organizations will just adhere to these diets because they think about the global citizen and they adhere more to these values than our ancestor values, for example. So I don't know how it's going to evolve. It depends how science will, to what extent we will recognize the good science that is being produced now in that regard.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't, yeah, I could go on, but I think I should.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
There's so many things though, and what I find very sad is, with the globalization in third world countries, I should not say that, but developing countries, they've been adopting like the standard American diet and high carb intake, and it's causing like so many health problems. And developing countries and poorer countries, and they've lost kind of their ancestral ways of producing food, or I don't know, recipes with meat and all these things, and they've grown accustomed to the sugary beverages, and I find it very unfortunate because a lot of cultural knowledge has been lost in that regard and replaced by health problems that these communities really shouldn't have to deal with. So I find it very sad because, and then the public health agencies are not organized in such a way that they're able to take the current scientific knowledge that is being produced and to help these communities get back on track or move away from these corporations' diets that are imposed on them. So I just find it very sad because I could say Europeans or highly developed countries, we were thinking that we were able to master nutrition very easily with all these diet hard hypotheses, and we've imposed it on the poor populations who had excellent ways of cooking their food, and all this knowledge has been lost, and it's fine. It's very difficult to go back, especially in that regard. Like here, I think it's Sweden. They had like a statement about the fact that ketogenic diets were good. I think the Public Health Agency has
Yeah.
said something in that regard, but so we might be able to get back on track on time, but harm has already been done in these poor countries, and they will have to suffer their own way through until someday they're able to recognize the validity of the scientific knowledge produced. So I just find it very sad ultimately, yeah.
Mm.
And I'm thinking with, World Health Organizations, they're very influent in these countries due to the fact that there's a lacuna due to the absence or little influence of public health authorities. So if health organizations like this promote vegetarianism, it's just going to make things worse ultimately because the populations just mainly have access to rice and beans, and which are on the long term unsustainable foods, clearly in terms of health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another big problem with that is also the fact that here in Canada we have, obviously, I mean, any developing country that has a public healthcare system, it's causing so much, it's causing to, and I mean, it's multifactorial. It's not just the public health measures, but there's other causes as well. But just the high sugar intake is causing so many problems for the healthcare systems. In Quebec, for example, we have the province where I'm from in Canada. Our healthcare budget, 50%, no, actually, the province budget, there's 50% of it that goes to healthcare. And this proportion is increasing over the years. So I'm thinking we have to find a way to make people healthy on a larger scale, because it's just going to be unsustainable for public healthcare systems. Because we're thinking about diabetes, but we're also thinking about all sorts of health conditions that can result from inadequate food intake, high carb intake. In some cases, even people like me who have illnesses that are untreatable or autoimmune illnesses, because sometimes you can, like one of the possible complications of what I have is an autoimmune illness on the long term, because I keep being in a state of chronic inflammation and fighting against my against this virus, and so this chronic fighting can also result in chronic fighting of my own body and perhaps developing an autoimmune illness. And these things are extremely costly for the system, and the drugs that are prescribed to heal that are costly as well. So that's just another problem I see.
Mm.
And I think that health agencies should really position themselves to target younger groups that are very seduced by the vegan diet or vegetarian diet, because it's just going to cause so many problems in this younger generation, right? So yeah, I don't know. Do you have other questions?
No, that's it. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Like
thanks a lot.
yeah, I hope that my goal with this making this video with you is just I really want to sensitize people to the problems of vegetarianism. And I mean, it's really seducing, as I said, to try to change the world, But the reality is that if you're sick, if you're disabled, like me, I'm feeling kind of disabled sometimes. Not as much as anymore, but um, I've been through so much pain and suffering. And how can you help the world if you're feeling like that? So choose your battles and don't put your health in danger. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm thinking that with advocacy work like yours and other people, I think that there's going to be a backlash. All those vegan YouTubers at some point, they tend to be sick and then they have to admit that they have to quit veganism. They're already quite vocal among that group. So I'm hoping that in the future, these people will also be advocates for a ketogenic diet or at least a balanced diet that includes meat and minimal grain products.
Yeah, that will be interesting, but there's been cases of vegans who quit and then they delete the channels because everybody
Oh,
hates them. Uh,
yeah,
mm,
that's not surprising. Yeah, yeah. And what I hate is just the fact also that they tend to say that they know everything about health, but I mean, they haven't looked at the scientific studies. I don't know. I used to follow it, and I don't want to talk bad about him, but Vegetable Police is kind of funny. But he's always saying how to heal your gut or how to heal this, how to heal that. But how does he really know? And why do we give him so much attention? I mean, I was listening to him, but then I realized like this guy has no medical expertise, and he's telling us how to heal things. Of
mm.
course, you can heal a lot of things with good food, but yeah. Anyway, that's also a danger. Like it's easy to listen to someone on YouTube telling you that you can heal things with certain foods, but yeah,
Of
do they
course,
really know?
you should be cautious always.
Yeah, yeah, and when you're vegan, you accept the whole ideology, and so you accept what everyone says about that.
Mm.
You accept raw veganism, you're thinking, oh, this is the ultimate way of being healthy and good, but it's just really malnutrition.